Now, hopefully today's video is going to be pretty darn interesting, because it's all about Captain Maurice Suckling, who was Admiral Horatio Nelson's uncle. He was Nelson's first patron when it came to the naval service, and he himself was the benefit of much patronage as well. And realistically, he is also someone who links together a lot of pieces of history, a lot of interesting pieces of history, and is the subtle context of why certain people have such a, how do I put this, desire to see Nelson succeed and help him. Because one of the things that happens is that Maurice dies, and a lot of the friends he made in his career, who he'd served well, they can't no longer benefit their friend. They can no longer help out their friend. But you see, Maurice died. His wife had died before him. He'd had no children. His sister had died, and she'd left all these children. And so he and his other brother had basically divided up these children, even though they had their father, between them to support them. So basically, his sister's children, his nephews and nieces, like Nelson, were his children. And this might seem strange, but it's quite a common thing in British culture, and has been quite common in quite a fair number of cultures, that when your friend dies, if they have children, you take care of them. In this case, these children, they might have been young adults by the time that happened, by the time their uncle left them, by the time they'd lost their mother. But as far as the men of the naval service were concerned, Maurice had been a brother of the naval service. He was their friend, their compatriot, and he was gone. So now, if any of those children he'd been supporting showed any promise at all, they would bend over backwards to help them. And even the ones who didn't, they would make sure they had a soft landing wherever they left, because their responsibility now was their children, because they knew he would have looked after their kids, because he had, for another friend in the naval service who had been lost in service and whose wife had died, he'd helped them out. And just as he'd taken over his sister's children and taken care of them, they knew what Maurice would have done, and they wanted to do what Maurice would have done for them. And this is quite a common thing in this period. So sometimes we talk about patronage in the Royal Navy, and we talk about lines of patronage, and we can literally look up careers of admirals and officers going back centuries, right up to the modern day, and we can see lines of patronage of people supporting other officers who are like them. But sometimes some officers are supporting the growth of careers of people who are not like them. And that's always interesting, because you go, well, hang on, no, you're actually promoting someone who's in a different patronage faction than yourself. Why are you doing this? And that is usually because of familial patronage. And familial patronage can be both something which is actual blood relations, or it can be adopted relations. Sometimes we refer to it as kith and kin familial patronage. And again, though, there is a difference in that patronage. Because if you are good, they will help you be great. If you're not good, they will help you find a nice place to land. Because that is what you do for your kith and kin. You put them somewhere safe. You put them somewhere where they can go off and have a nice life and won't cause themselves or anyone else trouble. Maurice Suckling had been a very good officer at doing this, and he was a very capable controller of the Royal Navy in his time. He'd had an interesting career, and today's video is more about his career and how he gets the position he does than it is about what he necessarily does for Nelson. Because the moment we make it about what he does for Nelson, this video becomes about Nelson. Very quickly, because Nelson is that kind of character in history. He sucks all the other history out the room, and everything becomes about him. Today, we're talking about Maurice Suckling. We're talking about a man who lived from 1726 to 1778, so he was 52 years old when he died, and he served 1739 to 1778. And he was a good officer. Now, I will say this, his service does not include many battles. He did serve on a lot of ships, though, and he did serve during the War of the Austrian Succession, and the 7 Years' War, and the Falklands Crisis, and the American Revolutionary War. And he was also a member of Parliament, and we'll talk about all that. But the thing is, Maurice Suckling was still a very good naval officer. A very, very good naval officer. He got given a lot of ships, and he did well in them. Well enough that he got promoted because of it. Or rather, as I try to explain with the patronage system so often, is that people think patronage is when people are promoted before, just based on their connections, and no one thinks about it. No. The patronage system doesn't work quite like that. Or at least it's not supposed to. And when it does start working like that, where people are being promoted just because of who they know, not because of... That's usually a very bad system and is shut down very quickly. The Navy almost self-regulates against that. Because you start having bad officers. You have to remember, at a certain point, a naval officer's legacy are those he was patron of. His ability to secure whatever things he wants as a legacy, as, a growth of the Navy, or how the Navy's result, or how things have changed and developed the Navy, are through those he's patronised. He's been the patron of. And so he wants them to be good, so that he will look good. It's a really interesting thing, but when you start looking into the history of some of the officers in terms of being made into the yellow, promoted to the yellow rather than into the red, blue and white squadrons, so they don't get those flags, they get carted ashore. Or when you start looking at officers who are in the squadrons, are actually have their colours, if you start looking and go, well, hang on, why is this guy who's a rear admiral, he's not suddenly getting naval sea service, he's not going to make vice admiral? It's there's always this idea that it's theoretically automatic, but no, there are theoretical limits of what should be the maximum. There are ways to avoid promoting. And sometimes they go, well, they didn't do anything wrong. Oh, no, but this person they gave patronage to as a captain turned out to be a real dolt. And lost their ship or did that. Oh. And you can survive maybe a one-off and get your career intact as long as you have good things behind you. But your career won't survive 2 or 3 of those. And that's a really interesting thing. When you start looking at the Royal Navy and its history... Now, there is always an exception. Anyone who's basically related to the monarch and is their offspring, etc., they will usually find themselves as an exception to the rule. But outside of royalty, there are ways to self-regulate. There are even ways to self-regulate when you're dealing with royalty, by the way. You find places to send them to, places which are suitable for a man of their standing. Which might sound strange, but yeah, you can find things like, yes, you really need to go off and command a ship in this area. The guard ship. Yes. And? Well, yeah, we're fighting a war in the Atlantic, so we send him off to be a guard ship commander in the Indian Ocean. There are ways when you're a navy as large as the Royal Navy was. And one of the fun things is when you start looking through the patronage system and how to... People like to go, okay, so the patronage must have ended now. It hasn't. It's still carrying on there, and you just have to look at some of the things that fall out that happened not long ago in the Royal Navy to this day, when there was the issues with the various captains in a row for the carriers who had issues, and what issues that had on officers who were high up the rank chain, who had been involved in giving patronage to those officers. Because basically the patronage system is supposed to work by you going out and selecting good officers, and you promoting them. You going, oh, that one's going to be good. That one's going to be good. That one that one fits my view of how you should run a navy, so I will promote them. Maurice Suckling was very good at both receiving patronage and dispensing patronage. He had been born the son of a rector, and he had one real advantage when it came to joining the Royal Navy. You see, his maternal grandfather was Sir Charles Turner, the first Baronet, of Warham. I always forget of Warham. I always want to say something else, and I go and check my notes and go Warham. And his great uncle was this gentleman, Robert Walpole, the first Earl of Orford, and arguably the first proper Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. There is a whole debate as to who is the first Prime Minister, the first person who's actually worthy of the title of Prime Minister. I do realise it gets into a whole thing of who's who. But realistically, when we start talking about a Prime Minister in the modern sense, we are probably talking about Sir Robert Walpole. And he is a Prime Minister from 1721, realistically, to 1742. Someone who's a Prime Minister for 21 years will have a lot of power. And when he goes, "That's my great-nephew," there is an impact. There is an impact. And it's not a surprise that for Suckling, his initial service, starting in 1739, comes when Walpole is at probably the apogee of his career. He's 3 years before retirement. He can spread patronage far and wide as long, again, and this is the interesting thing, today, in political patronage terms, whenever we're looking at politicians, we more often see them rewarding loyalty. In this period, loyalty wasn't enough. You had to be loyal, you also had to be useful, which meant you had to be smart. Because you have to remember, today, in this period, there wasn't the ability to communicate with people instantaneously around the world. You couldn't direct them and tell them what they're doing. You had to trust them to act in your name. That is a great codifier for requiring you want to have intelligent, capable subordinates. When you can't tell them what to do and be there telling them what to do, and if they muck things up, it's going to reflect badly on you. Suddenly you really do not want to send out a dolt. You really don't. You want someone who's capable. And for Suckling, this was important. This was really important, because when he came to trying to get into the Navy, when he tried to get in, he was able to find not just a place. He was, at the age of 13, he's appointed as an ordinary seaman on board the HMS Newcastle. Now, with the assistance of Walpole's support, and possibly also a little support from Captain George Townsend, he secures his first patron, Captain Thomas Fox, who is the commanding officer of Newcastle. And that's important, because Fox was known already in the service to be excellent at turning out young officers as great lieutenants. So taking someone from service entry to being a very good quality lieutenant was something which Fox was already known of in the service. So if you get to him, that's going to start your career off well. And that's what Walpole has done. This is another thing we find with the patronage system. It's also about selecting who is going to be the patron further on down the line. And basically, in this case, it's Walpole saying to Fox, "How can I be of service? How are you doing, my friend? How goes your world?" It's terrible. "I have this great nephew. He's a really smart kid. He's called Maurice. I don't know what to do for him. What career should I set him up with, Captain Fox? What career?" And Captain Fox going, "My lord, if he is a smart nephew of yours, then surely a naval career would befit him. I would be honoured for him to come and serve on my vessel. That's how it's done. And Fox really likes Maurice. He really looks at him and goes, this is a smart cookie. The speed of promotion, the absolute breakneck speed of promotion, is something to watch. It really is. He joins, as said, in November 1739. By April 1741, he's made an able seaman, being promoted out from ordinary seaman. By September 1741, he's promoted to midshipman. And he might be born on the books as ordinary seaman, able seaman, but realistically, he was always probably treated as a cadet officer. This is something that they had a habit of doing to start getting sea time young. They'd employ them as something else on the books and give them sea time and give them experience. In 1742, when Newcastle goes to the Mediterranean, well, he goes with them. He goes with them. And in March, in 1743, when Fox is given command of the HMS Chichester, he goes to her. He takes Suckling with him. And further on, during that time, that's when Suckling meets the future Admiral of the Fleet, Sir Peter Parker. Now, of course, Peter Parker is not only a very good friend of Maurice Suckling, it's well known how often he acts as a patron and friend of Horatio Nelson, and often looks after him, takes care of him, promotes his career. And this is, again, as I said, this is one of the friends Suckling makes. And they have a great experience working together. And then in March 1745, and think about this, March 1745, he joined in November 1739, when he'd been in the service less than 6 years, when he was not technically old enough, he needed to be a year older than he was, and needed another 7 months of sea service. Suckling takes the lieutenant's exam at Port Mahon. And, well, there's a fun coincidence. You see, one of the captains examining Suckling at this point is a guy called Captain Fox. Amazing. 4 captains get together to administer the lieutenant's exam. And what do you know? The midshipmen of all 4 that have been put forward to the exam all pass. Now, here is the interesting thing. Because if a midshipman passes the lieutenant's exam and does a bad job, it looks bad on the examination panel. So believe it or not, whilst yes it can, there are occasions when things go wrong and people get through who shouldn't. Usually it's a case of you don't bring them to the panel unless you're sure they're going to pass because they're good enough to. I remember my driving instructor I had a few years ago said this great thing about taking exams. I have got a pretty much 100% pass rate of my students taking their driving test. But that's because I tell them don't book the test until I tell you to. And then when I'm sure you'll pass, you'll pass. And he was right. He's a very good driving instructor, and it's the same here. If those captains think those officers, those midshipmen, will let them down and possibly fail the lieutenant's exam, they won't get to the lieutenant's exam. They'll be told to wait. It's not done by Muggin's turn, it's done by, is the captain prepared to put you forward for it? And so, he becomes a lieutenant. He's actually appointed to serve as 4th Lieutenant on the HMS Burford, a 70-gun third-rate ship of the line. And that's some good time for him. That's a good time for him, but he's quickly transferred in February 1746 to the 80-gun, still third-rate ship of the line, HMS Russell. And he serves on her as the 4th Lieutenant. So, by 1746, having joined the naval service at the age of 13, in November 1739, he is 4th Lieutenant on a third-rate ship of the line. In June the following year, he moves on to something more interesting, but we'll get to that in a second. First off, shameless bug plug. So, I do have to apologise because there is a mild nickname for this particular conversation whenever I give it, which is called the Dr. Clarke's Defence of Patronage as a System of Actual Leadership. And that's because often today people look at patronage and they presume it's the abuse of power. You see, a lot of the stuff in modern society we've dealt with when we've dealt with things which look like patronage have been people going, oh, you're my friend, I'm going to pick you. And it's not so much patronage as it is a chumocracy. They're my mates, so I'm promoting them. They're my mates, so I want to hire all them. I want to bring all my friends to work. And that's not really what patronage was about. I know I've made this a point several times in this video, but I'm going to make it again here. Patronage is about picking people who are going to make you look good by being able to do good. And see, the thing is, in today's society, because of communication systems and all the other things, you can afford to be split yourself many places more than you were, so you can therefore be vastly better at carrying individuals should you need to. But that's not good for you. That's a way to wreck yourself and your own company if you keep hiring your chumocracy of pals. And that's not what patronage was about. Now, yes, some patronage was doing favours. It was. But even Lord Walpole would not have wanted to promote someone who was going to make him look like an idiot. He'd want someone who's a credit to him. And that's also what a lot of the interrelationships, a lot of the social events, etc. are about showing. A lot of the events where you get families coming together, these big family gatherings, etc., when they do want people to promote their family members and writing letters backwards and forwards and keeping up to date, is about demonstrating to the wider family, no, our kids are not dumb, okay? You can promote them safely. You can tell your friends about them safely. And the whole thing about the black sheep in the family, and that's the thing, that's usually the one who sticks out because they don't fit with what the family wants to do, or they don't look like they're capable of doing it. But there again, there might be someone in the family who's happy to take them on because they're also the black sheep in the family. They don't hang out with the rest of the herd, with the rest of the flock. They don't do the same thing. It's a fun bit of history to start to look into, but realistically, there is a patronage is both the reason for the Royal Navy's success in this period, and occasionally for some of the issues it has. But it self-regulates because it needs to. Also, the sea is a great regulator at this point. It does tend to have a habit of taking out people who are problematic. Now, shameless book plug. Thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, supporting the channel, helping it grow. And this is a shameless book plug, which I do like to do occasionally, because I like people to know know my book, and there are more coming. There are more coming soon. But yes, well, his next career, he gets the support of Rear Admiral John Byng. Yes, that Rear Admiral. Or rather, that John Byng. Now, Suckling actually joined HMS Boyne at the order of the flag officer aboard her, John Byng, i.e. the guy who eventually gets himself executed. He's very connected, very, very connected into the naval establishment, as we've talked about before on this channel when talking about him. His father is the Uber Admiral at this point, in terms of connections. So, when Suckling is on Thursday, he joins a 4th lieutenant. He then gets promoted to 3rd lieutenant on 9th January 1748, 2nd lieutenant 16th August, and then when the War of the Austrian Succession is ending, he returns home, boy. He arrives at Spithead, 14th October 1748. But by the 1st of November, he's transferred to HMS Gloucester, a 50-gun 4th rate, and he's serving as her 1st lieutenant. Now, the captain of Gloucester was Townsend. If you remember correctly, I talked about a Captain George Townsend earlier, who was, well, a relative, one of his mum's relatives. And this is the first time he's actually served with a direct relative. Rather useful, you know. You've got an officer who's got a commission that's going to last even into peacetime. It's useful. It means he'll still get service time in peace. And he doesn't get unemployment when other ships are being decommissioned because the war's ended. He sails to the West Indies station and spends the next 3 years in Jamaica, finally returning to the UK in 1753. At which point he's appointed 2nd Lieutenant of the 3rd rate 70-gun ship line HMS Somerset, which was guardship in Chatham. And he achieved 1st Lieutenant on 19th April. And then on the 2nd of January 1754, he's discharged from the ship, and 3rd of January 1754, he is promoted to Commander, which gives him the command of HMS Baltimore. HMS Baltimore. Now, getting to this rank at this age, think about it, he's got to Commander. He will soon, very shortly, get to Captain. And he has been in the Royal Navy less than 15 years. Less than 15 years. He's not yet 28. He is not yet 28. He's doing well. He's doing really well. And this is going to be another good posting. It's going to be another posting which is going to give him peacetime duties. He goes to North America Station, and he takes command of the Baltimore in Charleston, South Carolina, because, well, she's not in the UK. And then he spends most of his time patrolling the Carolinas, but going as far as Boston. You know, in September 1755, he's at Halifax, Nova Scotia, when Admiral Boscawen decides to transfer him to command of the 64-gun 3rd-rate ship line HMS Lys, which had been captured from the French. Now, Lys is a 3rd-rate ship, which means she is a posted ship. That means you are a captain, i.e. a 4-rank captain, not a commander, which is a 3-rank officer. And it's a posted command, which means it's official. It starts your official countdown as a proper captain. Your countdown to becoming an admiral. That's why becoming a posted captain matters. Posted captain is not a rank. It means you're a captain who has commanded a post ship where your command is going to be posted in the Gazette. And that's from that point onwards that your time as captain starts counting towards your potential to be an admiral. And you always have to remember the Royal Navy has various ways of manipulating your career so you don't get to become an admiral. You might not get enough sea time. You might get promoted to the Yellow. There are options for them. The Royal Navy has options, and pensioning them off to other duties and other services, dockyards, and these things. All sorts of options to get rid of officers who they don't want to become admiral. It's one of those constant beliefs that keeps coming up to me as a historian is, oh yes, they just got promoted admiral because of time in service. I'm sort of going, no, the Royal Navy really did have ways of getting rid of you if they thought you were going to be an idiot. Okay, they don't always get it right. They are a human organization. They're like any human organization. They are as fallible as humanity is. But if they think you're going to be bad for them, they do have ways of getting rid of you. Trust me. And Leicesto was only armed en flute, and he's literally sailing her back to the UK. And the reason she's armed en flute, that means she is carrying a reduced, cut-down armament, so that she can carry stores and personnel back. The thing is, though, he does well with her. When he's separated from the rest of Boscawen's ships, he succeeds in reaching the Downs on the 23rd of November, and combined with it was definitely his chances for being confirmed as captain are made a lot easier by the fact that he has a lot of supporters. Now, please note though, his time to get to this rank is not unusual. Augustus Keppel, Richard Howe had all reached it faster. And this is where the seniority thing does start to come in. Okay, you need to reach a certain amount of time in service to be able to get to Admiral's rank. There are ways of accelerating it. If you're promoted to Commodore, and let's say for a battle, because they need extra senior officers, and you do well, you can receive an early promotion to Rear Admiral as a thank you, because you've done a startling service. There are always options available to the Admiralty to reward people who they wish to. So Suckling was definitely good. Definitely considered good. And alongside his full promotion to captain, he's given the command of HMS Dreadnought, which was the flagship for the, by this point, Rear Admiral George Townsend. Yes! One of his family. And sent to Jamaica, where of course Suckling does have ideas about what to do. And she's part of a escort for a convoy that leaves Spithead on the 31st of January 1756. She arrives at Port Royal, and that's always a nice place to arrive. It is always a nice place to arrive, let's be honest. Especially at this time. And on the 18th of April, and then they carried on. Townsend moved off to a different station. Suckling and Dreadnought continued at the station, spending most of the service at Port Royal. However, she was important there. She'd go on patrols of Santo Domingo. Interesting enough, there are two reasons you can be posted to a backwater like Port Royal in the 7 Years' War. One, you're there because they want to keep you safe, and you're useless. Or two, and you can tell which rank you are and what you're doing by what you're deployed on. Dreadnought, 60-gun, third-rate ship of the line. It's pretty much there, and I do mean this is pretty much there, as reinforcement to keep a tamp on things. Basically, Suckling has been left there because he's a safe pair of hands, he's considered. He's a junior captain, but still considered a safe pair of hands, in case there are problems, in case the war does spread. What he's got around him are mostly officers who basically are there because they want a safe place to put them for the war. But they've got a core of officers who are there who can lead them if things spread. Because the thing is, you have areas where you don't have war, you have areas where war is unlikely to be, and you have areas where the war is. This particular area, the Jamaica station, in this period is Port Royal, Santo Domingo, that sort of area, is an area where war is unlikely to be, but the Royal Navy doesn't want to take chances. And they still do get action. Dreadnought takes part in the Battle of Cape Francis, which is an interesting little operation. And when I say it's an interesting little operation, it's 3 ships at a line. Out of all the ships they have on the station, Commodore Arthur Forrest decide to take out HMS Augusta, HMS Dreadnought, and HMS Edinburgh. 2 60s and a 64. And if I give you their names, Arthur Forrest is commanding himself HMS Augusta. Maurice Suckling, of course, Dreadnought. And HMS Edinburgh is under Captain William Langdon. When you look them up, you find, oh, these are the captains who are there in case war spreads. And they go and take on a force of 4 ships of the line and 3 frigates. And it's considered an inconclusive battle. The British suffer 23 killed, 89 wounded. The French forces suffer between 500 and 600 killed and wounded. The French forces are composed of, well, 2 70-gun ships of the line, the Intrepide and the Sceptre, the 64-gun Opénetre, the 50-gun Greenwich, which of course had been captured from the Royal Navy, and the 44-gun, these are the frigates of course, the 44-gun Otard and the 32 guns Sauvage and Licorne. Interesting enough, we do have a bit of a story and anecdote from the battle, in that when the 3 captains met on the quarterdeck of HMS Augusta, because Forrest called his officers together, and this is the point that they'd seen the French were quite so much more than them. His expression was, "Well, gentlemen, you see they have come out to engage us." Suckling replied, "I think it would be a pity to disappoint them." Langton agreed, apparently. And so they decided to go, well, very well, go on board your ships again from Forrest, and they all wished each other luck, drank to toast, and went off to run a battle. And they did run a battle. Whilst the French were able to get their convoy through, it caused a lot of accumulative damage for the French. They attacked a superior force. They'd fought it with disadvantage, and they had managed to cause a lot of damage to the French. That meant when the French decided to did approach their destination, when they got hit by a storm, they actually lost the Opénetre, Greenwich, and Outrara. They lost them all. And damage is cumulative. Damage is cumulative. It's not a glorious battle remembered for captures of enemy ships, etc., but it is a battle where 3 ships of the line take on 4 ships of the line and 3 frigates, and beat them off at massive losses to the French for minimal losses to themselves. And that's got to speak to the quality of the crews and the quality of the officers involved. It really has. The Dreadnought herself engaged the Intrepide and also took on the Greenwich, and at one point was fighting 2 ships of the line and 2 frigates simultaneously. She dreaded naught and was winning against all 4 simultaneously. She couldn't board all 4. That was the trouble. It was a case of, which one do I pick to board? And they did well. Another time, Dreadnought, theoretically with the assistance of HMS Assistance, which unfortunately got becalmed, so she didn't offer any assistance, took on the Palmier, a 74-gun ship of the line, and, well, the Palmier only managed to escape by firing into Dreadnought's rigging and managing to get away. She was being beaten up so much by the Dreadnought that her success was to fire into rigging and run, which is a very sensible route to do, but it caused Suckling to be very annoyed. Very, very annoyed. He was also slightly annoyed when Dreadnought was paid off in November in 1760, but, you know, he'd sailed her home. He didn't stay unemployed for long. He went on to join Nassau, take command of HMS Nassau in 1761, do some operations in the Bay of Biscay. Unfortunately, he arrived after the Battle of Quiberon Bay, so he didn't get to take part in that, and he reinforced the squadron that had captured the Belle Isle. He does well. He keeps turning up, though, just too late for action, which is really annoying him. He's called up for the Falklands crisis in 1770, and he's given command of HMS Reasonable, the 64-gun third-rate ship of the line. He does like a nice 64. 60-64 seems to be his happy ship. But then, well, that Navy wasn't necessarily his biggest priority in this period. It really possibly wasn't. You see, it's in this period he started to become Nelson's patron. And it's important to think about the things that have led him there. You see, this is his sister, Catherine. Maurice had lost his wife, Mary Walpole. Yes, he'd married into that family. In 1766, after 2 years of marriage. 1766. 2 apparently quite happy years of marriage. No children. And then Catherine Suckling died in 1767. Think about that. He loses his wife with no kids, and then he loses his sister a year later. He does what any good uncle would do. He goes to see his brother-in-law and finds him falling apart. He finds his brother-in-law falling apart. And, well, he calls up his brother and says, look, we need to sort this out. We need to sort this out. Our brother-in-law is falling apart. It seemed to be a very strong love match between the two, between Catherine and her husband, and Edmund was not in a good state. So they basically divide the children up. One brother takes the responsibility for some, one brother takes responsibility for the other. They are there to help Edmund find places for them, because Edmund is now obsessed with dying himself. We wonder where, sometimes people do wonder where Nelson gets his obsession with his own death from, and this mild amateur dramatics on that topic. Well, I think it comes from his father listening to his father after his mother dies. At first, Maurice is not sure about it. About taking Nelson to sea, when Edmund tells him that he thinks that's what Horatio does. He actually writes, what has poor Horatio done, who is so weak that he should be sent to rough it out at sea? But let him come, and the first time we go into action, a cannonball may knock off his head and provide for him at once. That is a naval officer speaking. But he brought Nelson aboard the Reasonable on the 1st of January 1771, rather than probably April, when Nelson actually joined the ship, to give him a few months' seniority. He's his nephew. He is the child of his sister, which he is now most responsible for. If it is necessary and helpful to bend some rules for him, without causing any problems, he will do it. A couple of months extra seniority, that's really not going to matter much in the end. It's not going to matter much. It could help if he's good. And he does this. And he keeps on doing this. And despite the Admiral never leaving the Thames estuary while Suckling's in charge of it, because there's a de-escalation from the joyous thing that is the Falklands crisis of 1770, it's worthwhile remembering that there have been multiple crises over the Falklands over the years, not just 1982. Well, he moves around. Nelson now moves with Suckling. When Suckling is given command of HMS Triumph as the guard ship, Nelson is taken with him. She spends time at Blackstake, Sheerness and Chatham. In June 1771, Suckling's also made senior officer for part of the Thames estuary. That puts him in charge of organising naval discipline, marine detachments, all sorts of things. It gives him a lot of seniority and experience of administration. Basically, it's the sort of post you give someone who's eventually going to become an admiral, who you're expecting to become an admiral. This was also a happy time for him, serving with family, being able to look after his nephew, but he knew it wasn't good enough for his nephew's career. And so he gets an officer who's now a captain for a Hibbert, Purrier and Horton vessel, and some merchant sailors, to take Nelson out to the West Indies. The officer involved had served under Suckling aboard HMS Dreadnought, so he knew him well. He trusted him. And Nelson goes off on the 25th of July. And was technically aboard the Triumph for the entirety of the trip, so that he was kept on the books and didn't lose any of his naval service time. This was useful. It gave him experience. It also gave him time in service. And he could do this. It was unusual for captains to do this for people that are midshipmen, if they believed in them. That was the point of patronage as a system. You're supposed to open doors and give opportunities. It's up to the young officers to take advantage of them. If they do well, then you keep giving them opportunities. You keep opening doors. If they don't, well, then those opportunities can turn out to be trapdoors. And this allows him to keep Nelson moving around. He also has, when he's returned home, he introduces Nelson to Lord Sandwich, First Lord of the Admiralty, John Montague, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, and others to, help him. He gets Nelson transferred to HMS Caracas for an expedition to the North Pole. After all, Suckling himself had served with Captain Skeffington Lutwig previously. He knew him well. When Nelson returns from this, well, Suckling gets him put onto HMS Seahorse, another friend of his from his dreadnought days, Captain George Farmer. And when Suckling leaves HMS Triumph on the 1st December 1773, he goes on to half pay. But, he's considered suitable now. He's now a senior captain. There might be limited theoretical positions for him, but there are some, and they decide to stick him on the Navy board. They make him comptroller of the Royal Navy, which is originally titled Clerk Comptroller of the Navy, and as a topic I've explained the Admiralty Board earlier in this year. But basically you're talking about someone who is responsible for all the Royal Navy's spending and directing the funds and organising them. They are pretty much the most senior administrator in the Royal Navy, and that's the reason why the 3rd Sea Lord and Controller of the Royal Navy is such a powerful figure later on in history, because they combine the role of the Third Sea Lord with the role of the control of the Navy and think they're going to create a position which is more efficient. They do. But they create a position which actually in power rivals that of the First Sea Lord. Because whilst the First Sea Lord is the operational head of the Navy, all the administration of all the docks, all the administration of all the construction, all the administration of all the procurement, all the design and development, all the expenditure for that, all the maintenance, everything goes through the controller. Which means that if you want a ship available, the controller's the one who has to organise for it to be available. Which means whilst the First Sea Lord might make requests for things, it's the Third Sea Lord who has to supply it. So First Sea Lords and Third Sea Lords need to get on. Controller of Navy in this period is just as powerful. Unfortunately, if we think about this, Suckling himself dies in 1778. He has finished command in 1773. 1773. So he gets a very few years. And eventually he gets appointed in 1775 as Controller of the Navy. So he gets 3 years to try and do things. And he's proving capable, but he doesn't get long to deliver on stuff. Hugh Palliser had done well. He'd been predecessor as Control Navy and was by this point the first Naval Lord. But, yeah. Suckling also managed to get elected as a Member of Parliament for one of the Admiralty's boroughs in Portsmouth. He never voted, made a speech, or did anything in the House of Commons during his tenure. He used his position to try and get his nephew Maurice a clerkship in the Navy Office, and served himself as a captain on Horatio's lieutenancy exam. Nelson was, of course, just as underage as Suckling has been. But, yeah, he gets it. Because just as with Captain Fox, Captain Suckling was not going to put someone up there who couldn't do the job. And having made sure Nelson had all the experiences to learn he could, there was no chance he wasn't going to pass at that point. Unfortunately, he died from illness in 1778. But his legacy was a wide collection of friends and an adopted family, as well as family, that he was able to provide for, even in death. That meant they had opportunities. And those opportunities grew to be one of the Royal Navy's greatest ever admirals. Can't hold that anything against him, really, for what he achieved. With that being said, I normally finish my videos with a question. I'm going to give you this one. Considering all his capabilities and all his attendant skills, there is quite the possibility that if Suckling continues on, he ends up in some of the roles of St. Vincent and others in that period as a senior officer, a trusted senior officer. What do you think we can take from his earlier career and how he had approached people to judge how well he might have done in such a role? Do you think we can? Do you think he would have been good? Do you think he wouldn't have been? Why? I'd like to hear your opinions. What else have we got coming up? Well, this video is one of the last in September, but I think it's still before Collingwood after Trafalgar. But the Battle of Lepanto is coming up. Fun videos, fun topics. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you're all enjoying life, and take care.